let's talk about the balloon, right? The very scary floating balloon that caused such hysteria in the weeks before. If you don't mind tracking, giving a little bit of a rundown of what went down with this Chinese balloon, the reaction, the fallout as well, including Tony Blanken canceling his diplomatic trip to China.
Yes, well, the balloon showed up on all of our horizons just as Tony Blinken was about to set off to China for the first meeting, the first visit of U.S. Secretary of State to China in over 3 years. And as you said, the biggest fallout from the appearance of the balloon, in my opinion, if not every Republican member of Congress's opinion, is that visit was canceled. But the balloon appeared over Montana, and it floated across the continental United States over the next couple of days. There was immediately a fairly hysterical reaction in Washington in response to this violation of U.S. territorial sovereignty and to the idea that the Chinese government might be spying on the United States. So there were members of Congress and commentators, op-ed writers screaming about this. The Biden administration said the balloon poses no danger. It is not neither physical danger to Americans, nor are we worried about its intelligence gathering capabilities, where it's at, where it's going. So they waited until it had crossed the United States and was over the Atlantic, and then they shot it down with a single missile. So just one, whatever, hundreds of millions of dollars missile brought down that balloon.
We could have used a pin. How about an arrow? Like that might have, you just pop it and then that might have been more effective, right? Then it stays intact. I'm half joking.
I think some members of Congress may be working on developing multi-billion-dollar research agendas to figure out how we can develop a more effective set of pins. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Harpoon technology, we really need to be getting into that. I mean, as you say, this was incredibly hysterical and funny too, but hysterical in a dangerous way. Because this is the exact time, if tensions are increased, that we should be having diplomatic visits. But I'm curious really about the political maneuvering by someone like Blinken and the Biden administration here. Because there's no doubt that regular spying and surveillance happens on both ends, from China on the U.S. and the U.S. surveilling China. And yet this was decided, it was important that this was made into a big deal. Like, how do you think that went down, if you were to speculate? I mean, the balloon was spotted, and my guess is that the Biden administration saw it as an opportunity to look tough. What's your read on it?
I think it wasn't so much an opportunity to look tough as they felt forced into that position. Both the U.S. government and the Chinese government have been looking to improve the relationship, at least a little bit, because it's sort of been spiraling downwards and seems to be moving towards very serious conflict over the last 5 years. That's obviously started under the Trump administration, but the Biden administration continued most of Trump's policies, if not all of the racist rhetoric, and added some of its own policies that actually made the anti-China moves of the United States more effective. And China has responded in provocative ways, and so the relationship has deteriorated to the point where there is now sort of legitimate war scares happening on both sides, and that, I think, alarmed people in both capitals, and they wanted to. People in both governments want to avoid conflict. They're not looking for a war. There's a lot of speculation around the balloon that this had been sent by the Chinese government to test the United States or something. Or alternatively, there's a lot of speculation that the U.S. government had made the presence of the balloon public because it wanted to mess up the summit between Blinken and his counterparts in Beijing. I don't really buy the speculation on either side of that. The indications all point to the people at the top levels of these governments have been looking for a way to cool tensions. Even if, and I think this is an important point, even if people on both sides are not really willing to do the things that would actually prevent the trajectory, right, off of a trajectory towards conflict. So I think the balloon is just sort of, obviously China has a spying program on the United States. It's come out since the balloon that this is a fairly large spying program that has conducted surveillance on dozens of countries. So I think and there's also been some reporting that this balloon may have been meant to conduct surveillance over Guam in the South Pacific, and wind patterns just forced it into the territorial United States. So I think the odds are likely that this was someone messed something up or something went wrong. The Chinese government did not want a diplomatic incident at this point. And in fact, their response when the balloon was first made public was a very unusual expression of regret that the balloon had gone, as they said, gone off course. And so I think the odds are that both sides have been sort of pushed off course by the balloon.
Yeah.
It is because the relationship has deteriorated this badly that something so minor and comical as a balloon could do that.
Yeah, and I frankly I put a lot of the blame on the United States attempting to drum up it's the Republicans, but frankly, like, Chuck Schumer has had this China competition bill in the works for years at this point, ended up getting passed in the form of the CHIPS Act, and there is a growing consensus among both parties. It's like probably the only bipartisan consensus right now in Washington that domestically being hawkish on China is beneficial. And I find that to be concerning given the fact that our Cold War with Russia hasn't even really fully ended. And it's time for us to start one up again with China. And a lot of this started, right, with Biden soon into his presidency, forging that deal with Australia, right, where there was that submarine deal. Then again, adding more military exercises later last year outside with Australia in order to ramp up our presence there, closer to China. And weeks before this balloon news, the deal that Lloyd Austin struck, I believe, in the Philippines, where we've reopened a few military bases from that were defunct, but from our time of colonialism in the Philippines, and that is meant, obviously, to be a provocation or a flexing of our muscle with China. And China the United States has hundreds of military bases around the world, and some we don't even know about. It's hundreds that we know about. How many does China have in comparison?
It has one military base outside.
Right. So it's in
Djibouti. So
yeah,
in the Horn of Africa, which is a sensitive place, but certainly does not pose any threat to the United States.